There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there.
And if you're in Portland, there are a lot of men over there with guns. And the Buffalo Springfield had it right 30 some odd, 40 some odd years ago, and they're still right. And welcome. This is Paul Gibson, Retake Our Democracy. It's the 30-minute radio show that airs on KSFR 101.1 FM, your Santa Fe public radio station. And I'm Paul Gibson, the host of Retake Our Democracy. Good morning. And today I'm going to be interviewing...
Disconnected. Connected to. Drop socialist lurking.
I'm going to be talking with, sorry about that, Karen Whitlock, who's a progressive Democrat, challenging Republican Rebecca Dow in District 38. That's House District 38. It's down by TRC, Truth or Consequences, and Sierra County. And it also covers Grant and Hidalgo counties, so it's a big district. And we'll join Karen in just a moment. Last week, we interviewed Kathleen Burke and Dick Mason, two advocates who will be pressing for the New Mexico State Legislature to put on the ballot an independent redistricting commission. They're also going to be advocating fiercely to try and protect the 2021 census process. We're too late to have an independent commission for the 2021 process. So the legislation we'd be seeking in 2021 would cover 2030. I'll be 80 almost. But we still want to protect the 2021 process. And so I spoke with Dick Mason and Kathleen Burke on the radio show. And then we had a Zoominar on Tuesday night with both of them and Senator Mark Moores and Senator Ortiz-Pino. And that was fabulous. We sold out. The Zoom room was oversold and we had to turn people away. We're going to fix that for the next time. But you can get that Zoominar at retakeourdemocracy.org. Hover over the actions and events page and you'll see right there the Zoominar series. And it'll be near the top of the Zoominar series there, the full video of the interview. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that Retake has published its election priorities and toolkit as well. For New Mexico, we have identified just 6 races as priority must-win races, and Karen Whitlock's race in District 38 is one of them. Our election page also offers info on how to be engaged in races like Karen's and in the national election, either in swing states or in key Senate races. To find our elections priorities and toolkit, go to retakeourdemocracy.org and click on the election menu in the homepage. There's much to do and only 3 months to do it. So we're going to be counting on you. Okay, let's get started. Welcome, Karen.
Hi, Paul. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, it's good to have you. I always like to have our guests introduce themselves. So can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you got involved in politics?
Yes, well, I have been involved in politics since I was born. My parents were very politically active. I was born actually in Washington, D.C., and my father was the administrative assistant, top aide to a congressman when he was there. And then my parents moved to Florida, and where my dad practiced law for a while. But I grew up being very involved. My mother was the state coordinator for the McGovern campaign, and I was about 7 years old. And so I remember distinctly, asking questions of everybody that came in and really wanting to get to know more about the process. And I was always just fascinated and felt it was so important to be active, not just in politics, but in community efforts. And that has always been a part of my makeup. I've mentored kids. I'm a social worker. And prior to being a social worker, I was in the environmental field and for 16 years. And so I've always taken on different community projects. And that sounds really mild, because when you're managing multi-million-dollar environmental projects, but it still is a part of your community and how important it is. And then I went to social work school and became even more involved from a human standpoint as opposed to environmental standpoint.
Okay. And then how'd you wind up getting into politics itself?
I've always been in Grant County. I was very active in the community, and getting involved in politics was a natural extension of that, because when I became a social worker, initially I'd wanted to work with individuals, but I looked at the level of frustration with the policies that are in place. And I think the behavioral health care crisis in New Mexico was what the final trigger was for me, that I needed to be involved on a more macro level so that people on the direct level have more assets to work with, have more things to be able to help people with. And I just didn't see that happening. And I didn't see it happening in my district. And so I was an intern when I was in social work school in the New Mexico state legislature with Juliana Koob. And I decided that it was time. She encouraged me. I went and did Emerge, the Democratic Women's Training Ground.
Right.
And then I first ran for this race in 2016, and I lost in the primary by 29 votes. And then in 2018, I wasn't in a primary with somebody else, and I lost by about 1,000 votes.
Okay.
But I hadn't planned on getting in, but when no Democrat got in, I was like, this is the time. And
Right.
I discussed it. Rick called me and actually begged me to get in. He goes, "You need to get in." I said, "Rick, I don't want to spend the money and I don't want to spend the time." But, after about talking to me for about 2 hours, I was like, I'll think about it.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you did it.
Thank
Rosie
you.
and I spent a fair amount of time down in Truth or Consequences with some of the indivisible folks down there, and they were constantly bemoaning that their House rep was Rebecca Dow. And so I'm sure they'll be on the phones for you, because they do phones.
Yes. And they did during the primary.
I'll definitely reach out to them.
I'm very close with them. I love
okay.
Diana Tittle and Leslie Sekovic.
Oh, yeah.
Are they're my biggest cheerleaders and the biggest help I can ever imagine. They're great.
Well, it's always wonderful to see the people who walk the walk and talk the talk. And they,
Yep.
They don't just get frustrated at politics or what have you. They get their feet in and they dig in big time. And so it's good that you guys are connected. So
Yeah.
Our listeners may not know too much about District 38. So can you tell us a bit about the district, the communities it covers, and the demographic makeup of the district?
Sure. It encompasses parts of 3 counties. It encompasses a part of Grant County. It encompasses a part of Sierra County, and it encompasses I call it a fingernail of Hidalgo County. And overall, if you look at the district demographics of Grant County, it is highly Democratic. Grant County is. There's only 1 or 2 precincts in the whole county that go Republican. Sierra County is primarily Republican. And this it's a community called Verdon in Hidalgo County that actually is right on the Arizona border. They're on Arizona time and their kids go to Arizona schools. And there's only about it's a Mormon community of about 500 people. So it's really small. I've been there. It's a charming place. It's really a pretty little place, but it is there's not a lot of votes in there. if they get 150 people voting, period, it's good. The issue, the demographic makeup of the issue of the district is extremely poor. Mining is the predominant employer here, with number 2 being the government and number 3 being Walmart. And so there's about 25,000 people in Grant County, and I live in Grant County. I actually live out in Membris. I don't even live in Silver City. And then Sierra County is incredibly poor. They don't have a real major industry there at all. They rely on tourism and a lot of small business.
Okay.
They do have the spaceport there, but that to this point has not provided a lot of employment for the
Right.
area
Right.
at all.
Okay, well, so what are some of the key issues that keep folks up at night in District 38?
Well, probably the biggest one right now is the pandemic. The numbers are growing. We have particularly in Sierra County, they have quite a few people who refuse to comply with any mask orders, any social distancing. My opponent, in fact, she and I are kind of friends, and when I was there for a parade, a car parade, for Memorial Day, she came up to me and tried to hug me with no mask on. She was carrying a child that wasn't hers or her grandchild, and she had jumped out of a car to greet me that was packed with people. So in Sierra County, the people are scared, are the people that are either afraid or either think it's a hoax. There's not much middle ground with this. In Grant County, we have a lot of concerns with healthcare over and above because the hospital is in dire straits. We don't know if this hospital is going to get through. It has applied for critical access care, and it has been accepted provisionally beginning July 1st, so that it can then collect more money from Medicare. So that will help it. But it's still, over the years, over the past, since Martinez administration has cut subsidies to community hospitals. And so it's been a real problem. In addition, access to healthcare. You only have so many providers, and they're booked, for very long periods of time in this area. In addition, in the state of New Mexico, approximately 80% of the babies are born on Medicaid. And that, in fact, is true in Grant County, and it's even a higher percentage in Sierra County. It's about...
Did not realize that.
Yeah, Sierra County is 85 to 90%. I've looked at 2 different studies, and one says 85 and the other says 90, and I guarantee that's right.
Okay.
So access to healthcare is a huge problem in these areas, as is education and economic growth, economic development, and all of these things have only been exacerbated by the pandemic. It's only, gotten a lot worse.
Right. All right. Well, we're talking with Karen Whitlock, and she's a candidate for the State House of Representatives in District 38, challenging Rebecca Dow. And so what about your background makes you qualified to better understand the issues you just described and to represent the constituents of District 38?
Well, I think that my background has uniquely qualified me for this. How I first came in contact with Grant County was in the 1990s, and I worked for Phelps Dodge Mining Company. I was on their environmental staff, one of many, and I came to Silver City area to come and do some environmental work with them. In addition, so I was originally worked in mining. Secondly, I I then, after working in mining and in the environmental field for 16 years, I didn't work my entire career in the environmental field. I worked at state agencies, and I also was an environmental consultant. And so that, I think, really helps me understand the community as far as mining is concerned, and understand the importance of environmental protections as well. In addition, in 2013, I decided to go back and become a social worker, which is what I'd always wanted to really do. But it also made me understand the social makeup of this community and the level of poverty that we're facing. And so that those are kind of the things that I feel qualify me uniquely for this district. And I understand.
Well, it's interesting. When I looked at your background and saw the mining thing, I know one of the things that we got an earful when we visited, Roxanne and I did tours of New Mexico so that we could get out to other parts of the community. In fact, we stayed at Rick Glass, your campaign manager's home in Mimbres, one of the time we were there. And we got an earful about mining, and it wasn't positive. It was much more that they would like that mining to cease. I'm imagining you're able to see both sides of that, having worked in the mining. Can you comment on that?
Sure. Well, actually, and my husband's a miner. My husband works for Freeport-McMoran, but I see both sides of it, in that environmentally we have to, and this was a conversation I used to have when I worked at the mines. They didn't like the really strict environmental laws, but they came to respect my opinion that without them, we would obey what's there. They would obey what's there, but they're not going to, you know what I mean? So we needed the environmental laws to be really strict. But by the same token, it is also the biggest employer in the county.
Right.
And it's also the biggest employer in surrounding counties. People come from Lordsburg, for example, to come work at the mines, and Deming. So it is the biggest employer in Lordsburg as well. So so that you have to look at the importance of the mines, but you also have to respect environmentally the importance of making sure that whatever they do is done to the highest of standards, because we can't afford to not do it, because we all have to live here. We all have to drink the water, and we all have to breathe the air. The importance, though, too, of this is that, mining's not going to be here forever, and they're running close to the end of their mine lives. And it's not going to provide the level of employment. And the mines have told us this. They're not even being secretive about it anymore. They're saying, we're coming to the end of the mine life, and we're going to need, due to different, fully autonomous types of things, we need to provide more jobs down here. And they have said that as well, that you need to provide more jobs. And that's so important to look at. So that we need to look at the world beyond mining here. And we need to look at economic development issues, and we need to look at supporting small businesses. And we need, I particularly love the Angelica Rubio's positions and the Outdoor Act, because we have the Gila Wilderness here that's spectacular. We have the Gila Cliff Dwellings that, it is incredible. And we have a lot of, well, Gila, we also have Aldo Leopold Wilderness here. So it's really important that we promote those industries as well, because, like I said, mining's not going to be here forever. Okay. So we really need to take a look at all of that.
Yeah. I want to remind our listeners that it is in times like these that KSFR is more important than ever, offering timely news and alerts and a wide range of programming to keep you sane while you're shut in. Hopefully you're shut in. And so for those of you who can afford it, please consider making a contribution to KSFR. You can go to ksfr.org, click on their donate button, and be as generous as you can. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't have Retake Our Democracy. We wouldn't have Democracy Now!, which is just like the only credible news source on television and radio. And the amount of music and other local programming is just phenomenal. So support them if you can. And today we're talking with Karen Whitlock, who is challenging Republican Rebecca Dow in State House District 38. So we want to get back to that conversation. And we want to start talking about some policy issues, some legislative issues that should you unseat Representative Dow, you'd be faced with. And so the first one I wanted to ask you, your website says that you're very much in favor of investing in education and pre-K. Rebecca Dow has voted against increasing funding from the permanent fund to expand pre-K. Where do you stand on this and why?
I am a strong proponent of investing in education and pre-K, as I said, and including using the permanent fund to expand pre-K. I don't want permanent fund light like they did. I don't know. I don't remember this past year whether it was 1/4 or 0.5% they went down to. That's not good enough. We're 50th in the nation. What are we waiting for? We're also faced with this pandemic. And the issue on top of that, and it's the great equalizer, is that we do not have access, and it is a pre-K, it was a kindergarten, it's a societal issue we face in New Mexico, is that we don't have adequate internet or internet at all, or broadband in many areas of our state. And it's really important that we use the permanent fund in order to increase education. I am so glad that the judge did not dismiss the Martinez-Yazzie lawsuit, because we're still 50th in the nation, once again, this year. And so we haven't made the improvements that we need to make in education. We are doing the best we can as fast as we can, but this takes time. Right. It takes a huge culture change in looking at priorities. I have to say, I get so fed up with Republicans during the legislative session because I've been there. I'm the advocate, lobbyist, government relations person for the National Association of Social Workers New Mexico chapter. And I get so fed up with them saying that we overspent. Well, what do we spend our money on? We spend it on education. And I specifically remember Rebecca Dow and Jason Harper both saying, well, we can't afford to spend this money on education because we need to put more money in reserves. Well, that's crazy. We are the top 4 in this nation in reserves. So we're in a much better position than most states are. And yet they were turning money away from education. This is a culture shift. They talk about us being a poor state. No kid has ever been 50th in the nation been worth 50th in the nation in education spending. Kids deserve the best and the best environment to grow up in. And it's such a myth that we are such a poor state. We just haven't invested wisely, and the investments have been in oil and gas, and as opposed to education. And this, talking about the permanent fund, it's so important that we use what we have, and use it wisely. And that every time we don't do it, we're missing an opportunity to invest in our kids.
Okay. You also say on your website you believe in the critical importance of healthcare, and you've talked a bit about that already. But mostly you reference the under-resourced hospitals in District 38, which is, of course, important. You don't talk specifically about policies that you might be voting on in the Roundhouse. And so I wondered if you've had an opportunity to either review or become familiar with the Health Security Act, and whether or not you would support it if you were elected.
I am a strong supporter of the Health Security Act. I think that it is a wonderful pathway to ensuring everyone and ensuring that people get additional access to healthcare when they need it. In Grant County and in Grant County, we have the HMS, which is the Hidalgo Medical Services, which is a federally qualified health center. And a lot of the work they do is to create sort of a health security act type of micro environment here so that they help anybody. And they help you whether you have insurance or not, you're on Medicaid or not, and they provide quality healthcare services. I've talked to some of the people there, and some of the people that are connected with getting HMS grants and things to work off of. And this is, the Health Security Act is an excellent way to provide access. And these people at HMS and at our hospital say that the best way to bring more providers into the area is to ensure that the people that are there have the insurance to be able to pay the providers once they get there. So that is something that we really need to look at. I like the fact that while it doesn't get rid of insurance companies, it places them in a secondary role.
Right.
And that's really important because, as I like to say, it's all about the Benjamins. And we can't afford not to invest in the Health Security Act. As a part of my position with the National Association of Social Workers, we are in fact in support and have endorsed the Health Security Act in the past.
Okay.
And so I'm a strong supporter of that. And other sidebars of that would be the Medicaid for All. And last year they had they would be taxing insurance providers 1 to 1.5%, which would be less than they were previously taxed
Right.
by federal government, in order to expand the pool to provide health care to more people. So I'm also a supporter of that as well. And supporter of the reducing prescription costs
Okay.
as well.
So there's a reason why Retake is supporting Karen. And
Well, thank you.
those reasons. Now, one of the challenges, your district has a pretty low Democratic Performance Index. I don't want to get into the nuances of what that means, but it's basically a way of rating how well Democrats perform in those districts. And there's only one district in the state that has a lower Democratic Performance Index that is represented by a Democrat. So what are you doing to overcome this, and how are voters responding to your message?
First off, it's come up this time. It's about a 49.7, I think, or 5 or 7, I can't remember, which is higher than it has been in the
Okay.
past. So the DPI has come up. So that is part of the reason I got in the race, frankly.
Okay.
Is because the DPI has improved. The other thing about that is, in the primary, I ran as a write-in candidate. I was told by people in power at the highest levels of the Democratic Party in this state that if I were lucky, I would get 200 to 300 write-in votes. I got, in the end, through a lot of hard work and a lot of phone banking, you spoke earlier of the Indivisible group in Sierra County, through Indivisible in Grant County and the Democratic Party in Grant County, I got 1,114 votes. And Brian Egoff, Speaker of the House, told me that I got the highest number of write-in votes in a primary ever. Everyone was blown, including me, because when I said 1,000, people started laughing at me. They were snickering. And I said, no, I want to get 1,000 votes. And I got 200 write-ins in Sierra County alone, which was more than I needed. And in fact, we had, so we got far more than we expected. The other thing that encourages me about this is people have just come out of the woodwork to help and support me. We had people making phone calls like crazy. We still do. We've had wonderful volunteerism. And it's been so encouraging. It keeps you going.
Okay.
The other thing is that with that is Naomi Martinez Parra, another candidate you supported. She the number she pulled in Sierra County from Democrats was astonishing. John Arthur Smith was joked that he was the only Democrat that ever won Sierra County. He told me that himself, and she beat him there.
All right. We're going to have to take a little break here because we're at the end of the radio show. We're going to continue this conversation on our podcast, but I do want to give Karen an opportunity to tell you her website where you can get more information in case you want to sign up to support her campaign. Karen?
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to this radio show. I appreciate it. I hope I haven't bored you to tears with it. But anyway, my website is www.karenwhitlock38.com.
Okay.
And there you can endorse, we're getting endorsements, we're getting donations, and we're getting volunteers, as well as some of my positions on the issues.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week with another Retake Our Democracy on KSFR. Thank you very much, and stay active. It's the only way we fix this mess. Okay, we're back. And you were telling us a bit about how you were going to, a lot of volunteer support, and how you were going to be able to overcome the DPI in that district. And so a question related, how are voters responding to your message? You know, you've got volunteers coming out of the woodwork, but what about the people when you give them a call? What are they saying?
We're doing a lot of calling, and it has all been positive. At this point, prior to the primary, it was all Democrats. And now we're calling declined states as well as Republicans who considered persuadable universe. And we've gotten some no's, but we've gotten some pretty positive feedback. And one of the things that I've encountered, I specifically said, an elderly man said to me, he goes, "If you don't support Trump, I support you." And so I was like, well, no. And I said, that isn't much, that's a very low bar. And I said, so I think our biggest challenge is, even though, I've gotten people support me, people are so interested in the presidential race, while it brings out more people, you have to encourage them to continue voting on down the ballot.
Right.
And so that's where we're focusing our efforts as well. The other thing we're doing is, as a part of the campaign, is focusing on mail-in vote, having people, contacting people, helping them apply for absentee ballots, and then following up with them to make sure that they fill out their absentee ballots and then mail them in particularly early, because there were so many ballots that were received after the date, and of course we had wanted people, if they had been postmarked by election day, for them to be counted, but that's just not going to happen this time. But so we're on the early and often. We've printed out a lot of absentee ballot requests, and that's part of our calling efforts, is to get people we'll help them to get absentee ballots sent to them.
Okay. So you know that Rebecca Dow is very much opposed to gun violence prevention bills, or to bills to protect a woman's right to choose. These are issues that can be difficult for Democrats in rural districts, like District 38. Let's start with gun violence prevention. Are there any kind of restrictions on guns that tend to not play well in rural New Mexico? How do you navigate that in your messaging?
Well, that's true. But the other thing that is true is that people want common sense gun reforms, even in our rural areas. When they've done polling in these areas, particularly in Grant County, more people want common sense gun control. The bill that passed this past year in the state legislature with the red flag laws, where, if somebody who is a danger to themselves or others, they can have their guns removed from them, taken away from them. So that was the red flag law passed this past year, but we've got a lot of work to do. We need to strengthen our background checks. We also even though they now are required at gun shows and things like that, and Grant County is the second, as is Sierra County, second section, Second Amendment sanctuary county. They're still required by law in order to provide those background checks. We also need registration of firearms. But how I navigate this is we have guns in my house. My husband is a hunter, and my husband loves to target shoot as well. And the way I put it is, you don't want someone next to you who is crazy and with certain mental health diseases to be firing it next to you. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't want to trigger their volatility. So that's how we're doing that. I'm also a gun sense candidate. So I've been endorsed by, well, they don't call it endorsed. You're a priority candidate for Moms Demand Action.
Okay, great.
So I've been endorsed by them as well.
So, it's interesting too. I think that what we also need is some kind of education and trust building among the gun owners in the world, especially in the United States. Any time to introduce something like common sense gun legislation. And I mean, we have neighbors who are fanatical Second Amendment rights people and otherwise are sane, but the slightest encroachment is viewed as you're going to come and get all our guns. And, I just don't see that happening. And, but it's amazing to me how people who are otherwise very, very rational and reasonable people, when it comes to something like gun violence prevention and common sense laws, can simply, they just go, and that they stop thinking and they stop listening.
Right.
So I appreciate having people in rural communities who are willing to talk about those issues in intelligent ways.
We have to. We have to continue the discussion. We can't just pretend it doesn't exist here.
Yeah. With a woman's right to choose, there was a very clear option in the legislature in 2019. HB 51 would have reversed a 1969 bill that makes abortion illegal, makes it a felony in New Mexico, and it's only not enforced because of Roe v. Wade. It was defeated in the 2019 legislature, passing the House, but killed in the Senate. We should say that Representative Dow opposed that bill.
Correct.
It still got through the House. Where do you stand on this bill? How would you vote on it? And how will you explain that vote to your constituents?
I'm a very strong supporter of HB 51, or the bill that was HB 51, because it won't be the same number this time. But I'm a strong supporter of that bill and a woman's right to choose. It's not my job to make a decision for somebody I don't know. And in fact, I wrote a letter to the editor in the Silver City Daily Press about it, discussing these are heart-wrenching decisions. It's not an easy decision for anyone to make. I've had, friends and family who have had to make that decision for a variety of reasons. And, it's none of my business. And I don't believe that it's the government's business to be in that. There's a lot of misinformation coming, from Trump about this. And that's crazy. But that's crazy. It talks about babies, being aborted while they're being delivered. And that's inaccurate. And the bulk of, and late term abortions, or the bulk of people who get abortions during late term don't want them. It's either them or the child is already dead and, infecting the mom. It's not like, it's not an easy decision for anyone, and it shouldn't be, but it shouldn't be my choice. It should be with a woman and her healthcare provider, or a woman and her family. It's not my decision to make for anyone, and I feel very strongly about that.
Okay, thank you.
I've also been endorsed by Planned Parenthood.
Yes,
and
I'll put that on your website.
Yeah, so we strong support.
Okay. New Mexico is quite obviously very dependent upon gas and oil revenues, and that industry is also obviously flailing from plummeting cost of oil and from the pandemic. And so I'm wondering where you stand on how New Mexico can affect some kind of a transition. I mean, it's sort of similar to what you were talking about mining. The cards are there. We're not going to do this forever. So how do you see New Mexico transitioning from gas and oil?
Well, I think that we need to look at supporting small businesses. We need to look at also support selling, doing solar and completely transitioning onto solar. I think we need to retrain our workers. That bill has already been signed into law, the ETA, and it's very important that we be realistic about the cycles of oil and gas, because when things are good, they're good, but when they're not, it's horrible. And right now it's horrible. And we need to, while oil and gas is still here, we need to tax them more and take advantage of the revenues from that. We need to expand the severance tax, because right now, even though the price of oil and gas is around $40, that doesn't really impact us because it's not being taken out of the ground.
Right.
So that's really sort of a problem with it as well. I think we can support the solar industry. I would love to see solar panels manufactured in New Mexico. I would love to see us selling power. I would love to see more, once again, promoting our tourism industry. Once again, a lot of this has to do post-pandemic, because right now our job is to support the people that are already here and to help them so that when we do get past this, they can thrive. And so I believe strongly in supporting small business. The outdoor community I've discussed earlier. I live, in my opinion, in the most beautiful place in the world. I live in the Mimbres Valley, overlooking spectacular mountain ranges. I go hiking in the Gila National Forest every single day I possibly can. I think that we need to promote the outdoor recreation industry and ecotourism in this state. And those are classic ways to get out. I've been to Asheville, North Carolina, and I found out that tourism is the big industry there, and that place is thriving. And well, not during the pandemic, but
Right. Put a dent in that.
Yeah, exactly. But and it is cyclical, but it's nowhere near as cyclical as oil and gas.
Right.
And it's also not dependent on the whims of the Saudis, the Russians, and the Iranians, as is oil and gas. So I think those are other things. The other thing I want to say is that, we don't have to pay corporations billions of dollars to come here. Amazon, the only credits they are taking they want to have the road improvements up to where they're building, their building is. So it can, facilitate workers getting there and forward. That was already planned. We may push it up a little bit, but that's fine. I have no problem with that. But we don't need to offer these huge incentives for them to come here. One of the biggest incentives, and we have to look at this as an economic development issue as well as an education issue, is making sure that we have early childhood education for the workers. We need to have an education, and I have a personal story with this, an education system that is not 50th in the nation. My sister-in-law is a executive vice president of Fidelity Investments, and she was offered to handle the entire New Mexico region. She was going to be the president of the New Mexico. She offered to come to Fidelity. And at the time, we were about 48th in education. And she said, I'm not taking my kids from Boston, the top public education school system in the country, and putting them in New Mexico, one of the worst school systems in the country. That impacts my kids' future. So there's nothing like having a good education system to attract people to come to this state. Good wages, good education system, and have people taken away from the prison to school school to prison pipeline. Because if we educate our kids and we show them a future that's better than what they have, and we guide them toward that and provide the assistance that they need to go to college and to get a better education and to provide a better life for their families, then they're not going to be as many kids going to school, going to prison.
Right.
And so we need to change that. So we have to look at education as an economic development issue, as healthcare as well.
Okay. So the governor's been taking some pretty tough shots for strong positions in requiring masks and closing restaurants and other businesses. Where do you stand on this? Should we continue to keep all but essential businesses closed? Should we wear masks? Should we have to wear masks? And should, if today was the first day of school, would you recommend parents send their kids to school?
This, let's start back at the little bit earlier in your question. I really support what the governor has done. She has really worked hard to shut and to great political peril, I might add, shut this state down for a public health emergency. And we have to, the states that have opened up too quickly have paid the price. They now have surging rates. Look at our neighbor to the west, Arizona, which is crazy. It's got one of the highest problems. And then our neighbor to the east, which is Texas, which also opened way too early. And look what they've got, these surging rates. Hospitals, we're taking patients from those states because they don't have the resources, the hospitals, meaning hospitals or the resources to take care of these people. So they're having to ship them off here, which is fine. I think we should support them. But it's very important that we do what we possibly can, such as wear masks, stay home as much as possible. And I have to admit, in my house, I call my husband the enforcer because I would be out there a lot more but the reality is we need to stay home as much as possible. It's really important. I do think we need to keep businesses that are non-essential closed, and we need to support those businesses. We need to make sure that we continue the help that we can do as a state to support the small businesses so that they can continue, that they can hunker down when they need and then reopen, and that we need to help them to reopen. So it's very important. Wearing masks wearing masks and washing your hands have been the two most effective things against the virus. And we need to continue to do that. If it were first day of school, I wouldn't recommend sending kids to school. My biggest struggle with this is as a social worker, and I look at a child's social and emotional development, and particularly kids of color. And it's so important that they don't get at home what white people get. To be perfectly honest, they don't have the resources, and the state, it goes back to my, the importance of internet and broadband and adequate access to that. If they have some access, it's almost like they have none. You can cut in and cut out all the time, and that's not good enough. That's not good enough for our kids. And so we're still lacking adequate access to internet. We're still lacking adequate resources. So it's a big struggle for me, but ultimately for public health, I think that we have to give that the priority right now so that we don't look like Arizona and Texas. And we need to postpone the opening of schools while giving kids hotspots and providing them with computers and tablets so that they can do the best they can.
Okay. It's interesting because we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, and it'll be airing on Saturday, but I've almost done with the Thursday blog. and it focuses on the governor, who we have been very critical of for some of her policies, but we are so proud of what she's doing in relation to this pandemic. Some of the incredibly short-sighted and disingenuous criticism that's getting leveled at her is awful. And one of the things we saw was a study that was reported in the Washington Post that compared New Mexico and Arizona. And what's remarkable, I mean, everybody knows that Arizona spiked through the roof in terms of, their COVID. But what people don't realize is that while New Mexico took an economic hit for a few weeks, they now are about equal to Arizona in terms of all these different economic business indicators, because now Arizona's having to shut down again, or even more than shutting down is people won't go to work, or people are not going to go shop,
Right.
they're not eating at restaurants because they understand what's at stake. And so it's just, I'm with you on this, Karen. I 100% support how the governor is managing this and think it's very courageous. And you say she's taking political risks. I actually think at the end of the day, it's going to be much to her credit, and the voters are going to get that when it comes around in 2022.
I sure hope so.
Yeah,
I've read that article as well.
And I want to thank you for being with us for the show, and give you another opportunity to tell our listeners where they can find out more about your campaign.
Great, thank you. So the best way to find out about my campaign is go to www.karenwhitlock38.com and read some of my positions on the issues, and we're updating that regularly as well. So it's right now it only has 3, but we're putting those together. We should have my internet and broadband positions on there soon. But
Okay.
you can also volunteer and donate there as well.
Okay.
So
And
thank you for having me.
yeah, sure. And when I went online to see more information about Karen, I saw her face and I went, oh man, I know her from somewhere. So, but I couldn't figure it out. I thought maybe, because Roxanne and I have been to Truth or Consequences a few times, and Las Cruces a few times for meetings with community folks. And then when Karen got on before we started the show, she reminded me, no. I'm an lobbyist for the social workers and have sat in many roundhouse meetings with you. And so that's experience at the roundhouse, folks. And there's a good reason why you'll find Karen's campaign down as one of our priority races. And we only have 6 at this point in time, and it's probably not going to grow much. So you can get more information about her campaign also at retakeourdemocracy.org, and just hover over the elections menu and you'll have access to that. And I really would encourage you to get engaged in this race. I have a hunch she's going to pull an upset here, and it'll be awfully nice. Hopefully we'll be able to see you at the Roundhouse again, except you'll be sitting on the other side of the and I'll be lobbying you, although I don't think I'll have to twist your arm too much.
I'll use you to tell me what's going on the other side.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you for your consideration.
Retake Our Democracy will be back next week with another conversation. Not sure with whom yet, but I'm sure it'll be interesting. And that's all for today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.